How many people here are watching this on an Apple computer? Now, if you guys love Apple or own any Apple devices, you probably know about Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs is, I'm not an Apple user, but I have the utmost respect for Steve Jobs, his creativity, his innovative spirit, and just his visionariness. And that's not a word, but screw it. But basically, Steve Jobs has, he created the Macintosh, he created the iPod, the iPad, and he's just been an absolutely amazing person in terms of really pushing the envelope of the world progress forward. So I put together this compilation for you guys to enjoy. And if you guys really like this, make sure you guys subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, share this with friends. We're trying to help get more billionaire knowledge, visionary knowledge that's going to help take the world to a new place. So share, comment, like, and here you go. Here's some of Steve Jobs' best quotes.
Now, I've actually always found something to be very true, which is most people don't get those experiences because they never ask. I've never found anybody that didn't want to help me if I asked them for help. I always call them up. I called up, this will date me, but I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old, and he lived in Palo Alto. His number was still in the phone book. And he answered the phone himself. He said, yes? He said, hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school, and I want to build a frequency counter. And I was wondering if you had any spare parts I could have. And he laughed, and he gave me the spare parts to build this frequency counter, and he gave me a job that summer in Hewlett-Packard, working on the assembly line, putting nuts and bolts together on frequency counters. He got me a job in the place that built them. And I was in heaven. And I've never found anyone who said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked. And when people ask me, I try to be as responsive, to pay that debt of gratitude back. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates sometimes the people that do things from the people that just dream about them. You gotta act. And you've got to be willing to fail. You've got to be willing to crash and burn, with people on the phone, with starting a company, with whatever. If you're afraid of failing, you won't get very far.
Apple, at the core, its core value is that we believe that people with passion can change the world for the better. That's what we believe. And we've had the opportunity to work with people like that. We've had an opportunity to work with people like you, with software developers, with customers who have done it in some big and some small ways. And we believe that in this world, people can change it for the better. And that those people that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that actually do.
I felt it the first time when I visited a school. It was like had third and fourth graders classroom one time, and they had a whole classroom full of Apple IIs, and I spent a few hours there, and I saw these third and fourth graders growing up completely different than I grew up because of this machine. And what hit me about it was that here was this machine that very few people designed, about 4 in the case of the Apple II, and then they gave it to some people that didn't know how to design it, but they knew how to make it, to manufacture it. They could make a whole bunch of them. They gave it to some people that didn't know how to design it or manufacture it, but they knew how to distribute it. And they gave it to some people that didn't know how to design it or manufacture it or distribute it, but they knew how to write software for it. And gradually this sort of inverse pyramid grew. And when it finally got into the hands of a lot of people, it blossomed out of this tiny little seed. And it seemed like an incredible amount of leverage. And it all started with just an idea. And here was this idea taken through all of these stages, resulting in a classroom full of kids growing up with some insights and some fundamentally different experiences, which I thought might be very beneficial to their lives because of this germ of an idea a few years ago. And that's an incredible feeling, to know that you had something to do with it, A, and B, to know it can be done, to know that you can plant something in the world and it'll grow and change the world ever so slightly. More important than building a product, we are in the process of architecting a company. that will hopefully be much more incredible. The total will be much more incredible than the sum of its parts. And the cumulative effort of approximately, 20,000 decisions that we're all going to make over the next 2 years are going to define what our company is. And one of the things that made Apple great was that in the early days, it was built from the heart, not by somebody who came in and said, I know how to build a company. Here's what you do. Dot, 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 dot. It wasn't built that way. It was built from the heart. Boy, I've forgotten how much work it actually is to start a company. It's a lot of work. And you've got to do everything. You've got to come up with a name. You've got to come up with a logo. In addition to designing the product, you've got to figure out what to design. You've got to figure out how you're going to get it to the marketplace. You've got to do a part number system. You've got to go get bank accounts. You've got to set up charts, general ledgers, get a management information system, get a little kitchen set up, get a coffee maker, all this stuff.
My model of business is the Beatles. They were four very talented guys who kept each other's kind of negative tendencies in check. They balanced each other, and the sum was greater than, the total was greater than the sum of the parts. And that's how I see business. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. And we've got that here at Pixar. And we've got that at Apple as well. And so that's what lets me do this. Well, when the Beatles, when they were together, they did truly brilliant, innovative work. And when they split up, they did good work, but it was never the same. And I see business that way too. It's really always a team.
There needs to be someone who is sort of the keeper and reiterator of the vision. Because there's just a ton of work to do. And a lot of times, when you have to walk 1,000 miles and you take the first step, it looks like a long ways. And it really helps if there's someone there saying, well, we're one step closer. The goal definitely exists. It's not just a mirage out there. The greatest people are self-managing. They don't need to be managed. Once they know what to do, they'll go figure out how to do it. And they don't need to be managed at all. What they need is a common vision. And that's what leadership is. What leadership is having a vision, being able to articulate that so the people around you can understand it, and getting a consensus on a common vision. The neatest thing that happens is when you get a core group of, 10 great people, it becomes self-policing as to who they let into that group. So I consider the most important job of someone like myself is recruiting.
You've got to be a really good talent scout. Because no matter how smart you are, you need a team of great people. And you've got to figure out how to size people up fairly quickly, make decisions without knowing people too well, and hire them and see how you do and refine your intuition and be able to help build an organization that can eventually just build itself. Because you need great people around you.
More important than building a product, we are in the process of architecting a company that will hopefully be much more incredible. The total will be much more incredible than the sum of its parts. And the cumulative effort of approximately 20,000 decisions that we're all going to make over the next 2 years are going to define what our company is. And one of the things that made Apple great was that in the early days, it was built from the heart, not by somebody who came in and said, I know how to build a company. Here's what you do. Dot, 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 dot. It wasn't built that way. It was built from the heart. Boy, I've forgotten how much work it actually is to start a company. It's a lot of work. And you've got to do everything. You've got to come up with a name. You've got to come up with a logo. In addition to designing the product, you've got to figure out what to design. You've got to figure out how you're going to get it to the marketplace. You've got to do a part number system. You've got to go get bank accounts. You've got to set up charts, general ledgers, get a management information system, get a little kitchen set up, get a coffee maker, all this stuff.
My model of business is the Beatles. They were four very talented guys who kept each other's kind of negative tendencies in check. They balanced each other, and the sum was greater than, the total was greater than the sum of the parts. And that's how I see business. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. And we've got that here at Pixar. And we've got that at Apple as well. And so that's what lets me do this. Well, when the Beatles, when they were together, they did truly
brilliant, innovative work. And when they split up, they did good work, but it was never the same. And I see business that way too. It's really always a team.
The day we started Apple Computer, IBM was far more powerful in the computer industry than Microsoft and Intel are today. The day we started Apple, because they not only controlled the technologies, they controlled the customer. They had direct contact with the customer. And so we should have just given up. I mean, Woz, was, I should have just nudged Woz, hey, forget it. We don't have a chance. But we were too stupid to know that. We hadn't gone to business school. We didn't read we didn't even know what the Wall Street Journal was. I'd never seen a Wall Street Journal. And that served us well. So, what can I say? I think every good product.
So you're not going to remove Google from the iPhone and the iPad, but are you going to give users more prominently displayed additional choices to it, for instance, now that, because they are a competitor of yours now?
We definitely compete with each other. You know, I noticed in their latest offering, they're allowing their customers to take their iTunes music onto an Android phone, which is fine. They're helping us maybe sell more music. You know, we have some Google properties on our phone. Just because we're competing with somebody doesn't mean we have to be rude.
That's nice.
Okay. When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning, and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months. My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order, which is doctor's code for prepare to die. It means to try and tell your kids everything you thought you'd have the next 10 years to tell them in just a few months. It means to make sure everything is buttoned up so that it will be as easy as possible for your family. It means to say your goodbyes. I lived with that diagnosis all day. Later that evening, I had a biopsy where they stuck an endoscope down my throat, through my stomach and into my intestines, put a needle into my pancreas and got a few cells from the tumor. I was sedated, but my wife, who was there, told me that when they viewed the cells under a microscope, the doctors started crying because it turned out to be a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is curable with surgery. I had the surgery, and thankfully, I'm fine now. This was the closest I've been to facing death, and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades. Having lived through it, I can now say this to you with a bit more certainty than when death was a useful but purely intellectual concept. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true.
Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference. Sometimes life's going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. You've got to find what you love. And that is as true for work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking, don't settle.